There's a list of signs that Jesus gave almost 2,000 years ago when the disciples asked directly, "When will these things happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Matthew 24:3. And what's strange, genuinely strange, is looking at that list today and realizing how many items on it seem to be happening simultaneously right now. Wait, before anything else, this isn't a video predicting dates or causing panic. Jesus himself says, in the same chapter, that no one knows about that day or hour, Matthew 24:36. So what we're going to do here is something else. Put side by side what he described and what is actually happening in the world, and let you draw your own conclusion. The first sign Jesus mentions is the emergence of false Christs. Many will come in my name, claiming, "I am the Messiah," and will deceive many. Matthew 24:5. This has always existed, in some form, throughout history, but the reach that such a figure can achieve today, through social media, live streaming to the entire world simultaneously, without depending on traveling from city to city as in the past, is on a completely new scale. Religious movements with self-proclaimed messianic leaders continue to emerge, year after year, on virtually every continent. The second group of signs is geopolitical. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, Matthew 24:6-7. Alone, this wouldn't say much. War is, unfortunately, a tragic constant throughout human history. But notice that Jesus doesn't stop at wars. He adds famines and earthquakes in various places, Matthew 24:7. It is the combination, the simultaneity, that the text seems to suggest as a pattern of intensification, not an isolated event. Then comes a sign that, honestly, is what draws the most attention when we look at the current scenario. And the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Matthew 24:14. For most of Christian history, this seemed practically impossible. How to literally take a message to all nations before global communication technology. Today, with the internet, instant translation, and satellite transmission reaching even geographically isolated regions, this scenario has ceased to be hypothetical for the first time in almost 2,000 years of Christian history. This alone proves nothing, but it is undoubtedly a real and measurable change of context. There is also a more specific sign, directly linked to Israel, which Jesus describes through a short parable. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Matthew 24:32-33. Many scholars historically associate this fig tree with a symbolic reference to the nation of Israel within the Old Testament. And here enters a verifiable historical fact, without depending on any prophetic interpretation. The State of Israel was formally re-established in 1948, after almost 2,000 years of dispersion of the Jewish people throughout the world. This is a documented historical fact, not speculation. The question that remains open, and which generates considerable legitimate theological debate, is whether or not this event connects to the parable of the fig tree mentioned by Jesus. Paul, writing decades later in his second letter to Timothy, adds a description of social behavior that also yields considerable reflection when read today. In the last days, perilous times will come, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boasters, proud, abusive, without natural affection, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. 2 Timothy 3:1-4. It's a long list, almost uncomfortable to read aloud, because it describes behavioral traits that many people easily recognize by looking at their own social media feeds today. Extreme individualism, a constant pursuit of immediate pleasure, more fragile relationships. Again, this, alone, is not conclusive proof of anything, but it's curious how the text seems to anticipate specific cultural patterns written almost 2,000 years before anything resembling the internet existed. Now, it's very worthwhile to stop here and make an important caveat, because this is exactly the kind of subject that has led far too many serious people to public and shameful errors. Throughout Christian history, several figures have announced specific dates for the end times, and all, without exception, were wrong. Jesus was very direct about this. Not even he himself, while on earth, knew the exact date, only the Father knew. Mark 13:32. So any interpretation that tries to pinpoint a year, a month, a specific event as the definitive sign is going beyond what the biblical text itself proposes to reveal. What Jesus seems to be asking for, in fact, is not calculation or prediction, it's vigilance. He tells a parable right afterward about servants who must be attentive because they don't know when the master of the house will return, Matthew 24:42-44. The recommended approach is not anxiety or obsession with dates, it's living consciously, in the present, prepared, regardless of exactly when that moment arrives. So, putting it all together, false messiahs with unprecedented reach, wars and natural disasters that seem to intensify simultaneously, the gospel literally reaching the entire world for the first time in history, a nation restored after almost 2 millennia, and a pattern of social behavior described centuries before any technology existed to explain it. None of these points, in isolation, proves any date, but the whole thing, looked at carefully, is, at the very least, something to think about. So the question for you is, of the signs we listed here, which one impressed you the most when you saw it up close? Comment below with your opinion. I really want to know what you think about this, and I'll see you in the next video.